Hey, welcome back. Now that we saw how to move around the different components and select them, now you have to learn how to actually edit and modify the components to completely change the shape and the physical appearance of this sub D. So how do we do that? Well, we got to start using tools and things to work on this sub D. The same way you would use screwdrivers, drill bits, hammers, and pliers and things to manipulate and build and construct objects in real life. So let's get started on that. Well, it's pretty simple. First, let's go to a component mode. Say polygon mode with ray casting. So I'll hit U on the keyboard, and I already have that polygon selected. So if you don't have it selected, go ahead and just click on it with the left mouse button. Now, the polygon that's selected, or any component that's selected, even if it's an edge or a point, is the one that's going to be affected by the tool that I apply to it. So where are these tools that I use? Where's my toolbox? Where's my wrench? Where's all that stuff? Well, it's actually over here in the main toolbar, and this is where the main toolbar is going to come in real handy, and this is where you're really going to get familiar with the main toolbar. In model mode, you notice down here there's a menu set called modify. Well, we have a polygon selected and we do want to modify it, so that's probably where we need to go. Now, this is a polymesh object, so we probably want to look in the polymesh area. So let's click on polymesh here, and that opens up, whoa, a very big menu here with many tools that we can use to modify the selected polygon. Now, there are a ton of tools here that we can use. One thing you want to make note of is that not all of these tools work with this polygon. Just like in real life, a flathead screw is going to be very hard to manipulate, and you're not going to be able to manipulate it at all with, say, a Phillips head screwdriver. You're going to need a flathead screwdriver. Well, it's the same principle here. Some of these tools only work with certain components. For example, the weld point tool works for points, so you can't use it with polygons or edges. But that means that all of these different tools, and some of them that can't work with certain components, especially this component that I have selected right now, polygon, aren't going to work with it. So I can grab tools here, but until you become advanced enough to know what each and every tool does, you're going to get confused as a beginner, and you're not going to know which tool works with which component. So you might accidentally try to use the split edge tool with a polygon, which is a no-no. You use the split edge tool with edges. Sometimes the name gives it away, but other times it's not so simple. So what's a better way of accessing these tools and having XSI pretty much take you by the hand and say, look, this tool is for the component you have selected and this one isn't, so don't use this one? Well, instead of using tools here, what we can do is something else. We can right click on this component, for example. XSI is so smart, it knows that we have a polygon selected. And if we right click on top of that polygon, you get this right click menu, and you'll see it says tagged polygons, and tagged is XSI slang that means selected. So it's just a cool way of saying selected, if you can even say that. Okay, so right now we have polygons selected or tagged. XSI is smart, it knows this. So what it does is down here, it gives you all the tools that work with polygons. So for example, the edit polygon tool, the slice polygons tools, the collapse components which collapse polygons, extrude along axis, so on and so forth. All of these tools work with polygons, and none of the tools that don't work with polygons are in this menu. So it's basically a nice clean filtered out menu that shows you the tools that you need to get the job done right now in your situation, without having to bog you down with all these extra tools that you're probably not going to use and you can't use because they don't work with polygons. So it's best to use the right click menu, because you can just right click anywhere here in your viewport on the object that you have the component selected on, and you get the menu, instead of having to come over here to the main toolbar, clicking here, and then trying to get one of these tools. Right click over here and it's much easier, much faster to work in XSI. So let's modify this component. For example, let's come over here and use the subdivide polygons tool. Let's click that with the left mouse button, and this polygon becomes subdivided. You can see it got cut up one time in all its sides, from top to bottom and left to right, which means that now it's 4 polygons. It was subdivided, so now it's 4. This essentially broke down our polygon into more polygons and gives us more detail to work with. So now we have a new point down here. So if I hit T on the keyboard, I could select that point, and now using the manipulator, just like I showed you in the last video, I can move that point around. And I can go ahead and select this point, for example, move that one, and I think you get the idea. Now we have more components to play around with. Okay, so that's basically how that works. Now let's close this PPG. If we go ahead and select, say, edges, so I'm going to hit I on the keyboard to go to raycasting edge mode, and I'll select, say, this edge, all these edges on the top up here. If I right click on this object, now you'll see XSI says tagged edges. XSI knows that we have selected edges. And down here, you'll only see tools that apply to edges, so you won't see any tools for editing polygons or points, which makes perfect sense. So we can say use the bevel components tool to bevel those edges. And bevel is basically what you just saw here. This object gets beveled on the top, and you'll get used to those tools once we get into modeling actual objects. You're going to get real familiar with these because we're going to use these a lot. Okay, so there you go. We saw that we beveled the top, so now the top of the sub D object completely changed shape. This thing no longer looks like a sphere. It looks like, well, a mashed up sphere or a crazy retarded sphere, I don't know. But you get the idea. And if we go to point mode using T on the keyboard, of course, like we already learned, we can go ahead and select these points and do different things with them. For example, I can go ahead and right click and I can use the weld points tool. I can disconnect points, delete components, delete points. For example, I can take this point here and I can actually delete it, get rid of it. Okay, and so on and so forth. So you get the idea. So that's how you can select the components, and that's how you can modify them. It's really that simple. Just select the components that you want to modify, like these up here, for example. Right click on the object. XSI knows that's what you want to do, so here's your different tools for doing it. Now I'm not going to go over all of these tools now. We'll get to see how these tools work once we start to model really neat objects using sub-Ds in XSI, and that's where the fun part is going to begin. So this is pretty easy. Go ahead and play around with it for a while. Don't be afraid to take, say, this any cube object or a sphere or any sub-D object and use it almost like a guinea pig and play around with it, modify it to your heart's content so you get a little bit used to it and get your feet wet modifying these components in XSI. And I'll see you in the next video.